The age-old question, if God already has a plan and everything is by divine providence, do we really have free choice? So every time we use our choice, we're messing up his plan? If we don't happen to choose what he already planned? How does that work? By the same token, if God already has a plan, how do our prayers change God's plan? Or do they? Can they? Before I continue with my monologue, where I do all the talking, I want to invite you to a VIP session, a Zoom session, in which we get together to actually have a conversation and discuss all things Jewish, all things holy, all things healthy. So click on the link below and join us where we can have a two-way conversation. So let's take a closer look at that whole phenomenon. We have, for example, God was very angry at the people after they made the golden calf, and he said he was going to destroy them. But Moshe argued and prayed for the Jews, which is one aspect of prayer, is to ask for forgiveness. And God changed his mind. So the prayer actually averted a disaster that was going to happen. But because of the power of the prayer, it didn't happen. So it certainly sounds like God changed his mind, which is kind of puzzling. What, did God have a bad thought, a wrong thought, and then corrected it? On the other hand, we have the non-Jewish prophet Bilam, the guy with the talking donkey. He wanted to curse the Jews, but God wouldn't let him. So he made every attempt, using every trick in the sorcery book, in the book of sorcerers, and it all turned into blessings. God turned the curse into blessings. And that's a marvel that we talk about all the time. Did he turn the curse into blessings, or they just were never any curses? They were not going to happen. They were not part of the plan. They were not in the writing. So it never happened. Which, that would be good news too. He thought he could create a curse out of something, and no, there was no curse. Not going to happen. Or was there a possibility that his curses could have an effect, but God protected us from it and turned it into blessings? So we could say there are many theoretical, hypothetical possibilities which were never intended to become reality. Can a person curse another person? Yes, he can curse. Are any of those curses valid in principle? And so they might, in principle, actually occur? We must assume that, otherwise Bilam was just being foolish. So he tried 3 or 4 times to curse the Jews, and each time he said, I will try, but only what God says for me to say will come out. I can't go against God's will. Well, then why did he try? So it sounds like there was some reality to the possibility of a curse. If there was no chance, if there was no validity to the thought even, then why was he trying? He was not a fool.
So there are things that have a certain validity, like an accusation against someone. The accusation is valid. He doesn't deserve a great punishment, but there's something true or valid about what you're saying. The criticism has some truth to it, but it's not going to become a curse because that's going too far. And then there are things that were never valid in the first place, which are really quite irrelevant. When we ask for forgiveness in prayer, we ask for two kinds of forgiveness. One is that none of the accusations, none of our guilt record should be valid at all. We're not bad, we're good, we deserve only blessings. Or at least you say that of others. But then there's a second prayer or for forgiveness, which means even if we are a little bit guilty, even if there is some validity to our failure, to our culpability, let's not make a big deal about it. Let's look at the positive side, balance it out. We're more good than bad, so let's not focus on the bad. Those are two forms of forgiveness. Question is, what was God's original plan? Was he going to punish or not? And if he was, how does asking for forgiveness change his plan? He's got to rewrite the whole thing? Throw out the old script and bring in a new one? So the whole dilemma hinges on one assumption. We're assuming that before God created the world, he already had a plan in place, which makes sense. You don't make a plan after you create. You make the plan before you create. So why did God create the 8 billion people that are now alive on Earth? Give or take a few. Every one of them was created with a plan, with a very detailed plan of everything that's going to happen in their lives. Of course, that came before creation. You create with a plan, with a blueprint. So we're assuming that God's plan was written or made before he even created the world. Now we come along, he gives us freedom of choice. What are we supposed to do? The plan is inviolate. It's God's plan. How can you do anything other than his plan? So where is the freedom of choice? The truth is, though, that God's plan was designed around the choices that we are going to make. So yes, it was made before creation, but not before God checked to see what we're going to choose. So all 8 billion people, before God created them, he checked to see which choices they're going to make, and according to those choices, he designed a plan for their lives, for the effect they're going to have on the universe, and so on. Very simply put, God is above time. He's not limited by time. So when we are created, we have no idea what we're going to choose for the rest of our lives, not even for the next moment. But God already knows what we're going to choose because to him, the choice already happened. In other words, the future and and the present are the same for him. Past, present, future are all the same. God sees all three of them at the same time. A good example for that is there are a bunch of people on a ship that is sailing past the shoreline. There are people on deck, there are people below deck, and there are people on the crow's nest, the observation deck. Each of them sees a different amount of the shore. The guy in the observation deck can see without turning his head. He can see where they're coming from, the houses or the trees they just passed. He can see the trees that are directly in front of the ship, and he can see in his peripheral vision, he can see the trees that they're going to pass in a moment. So he sees three dimensions: past, present, and future. The guy on the deck can't see that far to the past and can't see that far to the future. His focus is mainly on what's in front. But the guy below deck, looking through a port window, can only see what's directly in front of him. So it depends on how limited your vision is. God's vision is not limited at all, so he sees past, present, future exactly the same time. So when God is thinking about the future, he is also looking at the present. So before God creates the world, he already sees the choices that we are making in the future. That's a fascinating change of. Does God know what I'm going to choose before I choose it? No. He's not predicting my behavior. He knows what I choose because he sees me choosing it. Not before I choose it. Before I know what I'm going to choose, he already sees me choosing it. So in effect, how does God know what I'm going to choose? Because he sees me, he knows what I'm going to choose because I chose it. So the information comes from me, not without me. You know, people think God knows what you're going to choose before you even exist. So he's like predicting what's going to happen. It hasn't happened, and no. See, when you say, does God know everything? Sure, he's God. Well, does he know what I'm going to choose? If you haven't already made the choice, then what is there to know? So to us, the future is non-existent. So if I predict what's going to happen tomorrow, I'm just guessing. Like, you know, the typical weather report. It's hardly ever correct because they're just guessing, even though they have indications and cloud formations and all sorts of stuff, and they still can't get it right. So to us, the future does not exist. So if God knows what's going to happen tomorrow, he's guessing, he's projecting, he's a prophet. God knows everything that there is to know. If we haven't chosen yet, because the future doesn't exist yet, then what is there to know? I haven't made a choice. Why would he know what I'm choosing, what I'm going to choose, if I haven't chosen yet? So, he doesn't know everything? He knows everything there is. My choice doesn't exist yet. So we say, well, he predicts the future. No, he sees the future. And therefore, we don't call God a prophet. He's not predicting the future. He's describing the future that already exists as far as he's concerned. Okay. So now the point is this. Do I have free choice? Can my choice go against God's plan? No, it can't. And it doesn't have to. You make your choice. God makes a plan around that choice. You join a gang to rob a bank. That's your choice. Now God says, what, should I let him rob the bank? Nah, not going to happen. So they become the gang that can't shoot straight. So why is it when I make a choice, I can't always succeed? I decide to do something and I can't pull it off. I try, it doesn't happen. It's because once I make my choice, then God's plan kicks in. Because the plan was, what should happen with this person's choice? Should he succeed? Should he not succeed? Should he succeed halfway, partially? So did God know that Bilam is going to curse the Jews? Yes. And in that, the curse is real. The attempt is real, the intention is real, and theoretically, the possibility is real. He was a good curser. His curses worked. So why didn't it work this time? Because when God saw his choice to curse before he even created the world, God decided it ain't going to happen. He turned it into blessings. So there is no conflict between God's plan and our choice. Not because our choice must always match the plan, but because the plan is designed around the choice. Because we made a certain choice, that's why God made the plan that he made. Essentially, what we're saying is that our choice comes first. First, he gives us freedom of choice. Then he makes a plan. Almost like protecting us from our own bad choices. Now, how does that apply to prayer? God sees us praying in the future. Does that prayer change the design of his plan? The answer is yes. Knowing that you're going to pray, God designs a different plan for you than he would have had you not prayed. So when we get up to pray, the thinking is, maybe this prayer is the one that made God give me a good plan in response to my prayer. So am I changing his mind? No. The same is true with giving charity. If you give charity, it can save your life. How does it save your life? If you're destined to die, you're going to die. If not, how does the charity rewrite the script? So again, when God sees you choosing to give charity, he writes a different plan than he would have written had you not chosen to give charity. That's not true of every mitzvah. If you light Shabbos candles, for example, nowhere does it say that will save you from death. But if you give charity, we're told that it will save people from Why? Because when you give charity, you are giving life. If you give life, you get life. So before God makes the plan of how long a person should live, he checks a number of things. Are you going to choose to pray? Are you going to choose to give charity? Are you going to choose to repent if you're guilty of serious sins? And will you get a blessing from a holy person? Those are the conditions in which God gives life. The most common condition is, will you consult a doctor? So God says, let's see, I'll give this guy 80 years of life without need for a doctor. But I'll give him 100 years if he goes to a good doctor, or if he gets a blessing from a really holy person, or if he gives charity, or if he does tshuva, or if he prays. So there are some people who are given 100 years of life without a doctor and without a blessing and without charity. That's the plan. Then there's a plan, 80 years without the charity, 100 years with the charity. So if a person says, well, am I going to pray, give charity, do tshuva? It's not going to change anything. The plan is already written in stone. So no matter what I do, it's not going to make a difference. Then you have to think, but wait a minute. If God bases his plan for me on my choice, this might be the choice that makes the difference for which God planned for me to have a full life. So I'm simply acting out my own destiny. So does that mean that I am destined to give the charity and I have no choice? No, I already made the choice. It's not I'm destined to make it. I've already made it. Now I have to catch up to myself. The present me has to catch up to the future me. In most instances, the future me is better than the present me. And so anything I can do that is positive might be the choice that I already made in the future. So I'm simply being true to myself, the real me. The most powerful aspect of this whole thing is, why wouldn't God make a plan first? It's his world, it's his plan, it's his creation. So why doesn't the plan come first? So we're literally saying God puts us first. That's how important our choices are to him. His will is sacred to us, but our will is sacred to him. So we put him first when we're in a good mood. He puts us first, always. So does your prayer have an effect? Absolutely. But there are two kinds of effect. One is called a blessing, and the other one is called the prayer. A blessing simply means that which God already planned for me can happen in a spiritual way, in an invisible way, or it can happen in the physical. It's like I have a lot of money in my account, It's all mine. It's sitting there in my account. But I can't withdraw from my own account. So I'll never have those dollars in my hand. A blessing means I gain access to my own account. The blessing that God gave me got stuck somewhere along the line, coming from a completely spiritual realm on its way to becoming a totally physical reality. A blessing opens that channel and allows what I already have on my account to become accessible and available to me. So you go to a tzaddik and he gives you a blessing, which means he opens the channels. Sometimes the tzaddik will say, I'm sorry, I don't see any blessing, meaning I can't gain access to your account. So you have to settle for the blessing on a spiritual plane. Like, for example, if God gives us the blessing of children, will it be physical children that we actually give birth to, or will it be students who are considered your children spiritually? Then there's another thing called actual prayer. Actual prayer means creating in God an intention and a desire that wasn't there before. How does that work? We know that God uses 10 attributes in his running of the world, creating of the world. There's kindness, there's judgment, there's compassion. They're all going on at the same time. Like to make it visually I think it's in the high holiday prayers. We say God is sitting on the throne of judgment. We want him to feel compassion, like get up from the throne of judgment and sit on the throne of compassion. Meaning to say, all these attributes are functioning. Which of them are we going to tap into? So God has reason to be judgmental. He knows all our failures. So there is validity to a judgment. God also knows all our weaknesses. So there is validity to compassion. By prayer, we can actually change the focus from the throne of judgment to the throne of compassion. So it's not like we're creating something that doesn't exist. God's compassion exists, but so does his judgment. So, for example, on a day of judgment, like Yom Kippur, we ask God to switch from the judgment to the compassion, because the compassion is there. Only the focus changes. So in the case, let's say, of God being angry at the people after they made the golden calf, and he says, I'm going to wipe them out. Was that just a threat? Just saying, knowing that Moshe is going to pray for them and he's going to forgive them? Or was that a reality? Seems like it was the reality. The judgment, in God's judgment, was they need to be wiped out. So what did Moshe's prayer do? Didn't bring that into reality. He switched it. Instead of acting on that judgment, he prevailed on God to act on the compassion that existed kind of in the back burner, but the prayer brought it to the front. So there was a switch. He got up from the throne of judgment and sat on the throne of compassion. So a prayer that begins with the words, "May it be your will," is different from a prayer, "Bless us with whatever, successful year, good health." Bless us means give us access to what we already have in our account. May it be your will means right now you want to be judgmental, but you also want to be compassionate. So may it become your will to switch from the will of judgment to the will of compassion. So the wording is precise, it's correct. When we need access, we ask for a blessing. When we need a shift of focus, we ask, may it be your will. Meaning it's not your will right now, but may it be your will that you forgive us and we make up and we're friends again. So yes, prayer does have an effect, and giving charity has an effect, and a doctor has an effect. So the doctor should not say, if the guy's destined to live, he'll live. If not, then I'm not going to help it anyway, so I'm going back to sleep. No, your intervention might be exactly the reason that God destined this patient to live many, many long years. So get up and fulfill your own future. Because we don't know what our future is, we still have free choice. If I knew what I was going to choose in the future, then I would have no free choice. So keep the prayers going, keep the charity going, consult with a good doctor, a doctor who's really interested in your well-being, and get a blessing from the Rebbe. Only good news.
If you enjoyed this conversation or this topic, and you're looking for more information, or you want to hear it again from another angle, there is a way to do that. And that is in this book. It's all there. Order it from Amazon. You can read it, reread it, and share it.